Nacimos acá, 66 años de vida. Lo que debe sentir la persona que esté viendo lo que aquí está pasando. No voy a sentir nostalgia, tristeza. Bueno, es importante que cuando uno pasa un momento como el que yo estoy pasando ahorita,
Claro, sí, ahorita poco.
después, bueno, me da alegría.
Llegó la noche fatal.
Eso es bueno, eso es bueno.
Llegó la noche fatal, noche de agonía.
¿Qué opina usted de este proceso de división política que tenemos entre, como decimos popularmente aquí, chavistas y adecos, producido por la señora Tamara Villamil?
Yo le digo a la gente, al entrar a mi cuarto, primero tienen que tocar a Chanoff. Y el que no lo quiera no puede entrar, porque ¿por dónde va a entrar sin tocarlo? ¿Ah?
Ahorita la sedimentación nos está matando a todos. Ante todo por la plaga, por la rata, por muchos insectos que se van acercando hacia los palafitos.
Pero la sedimentación sí nos está afectando muchísimo, porque la gente está emigrando, Congo está quedando solo. Y es algo que nos aterra. Y Congo tiene poco tiempo ya. El tiempo de Congo es muy corto de vida.
Porque el pueblo ya está perdido, en pocas palabras. Ya esto es monte y culebra.
Hello, everybody.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi. I'm Lisa Chanoff. I'm co-founder of Catapult Film Fund, and I am thrilled to be here today with these brilliant filmmakers to discuss this fantastic film, Once Upon a Time in Venezuela. Before we jump into some questions, some discussion, I would love to just do a quick introduction. We have here Anabel Rodriguez Rios, who is the director of the film, Venezuelan filmmaker. Tsep Bruderman, who was the producer editor of Once Upon a Time in Venezuela, and Marianela Maldonado, the co-writer.
Hello.
Also,
Hello.
Hi.
Well, you know, I had the pleasure of seeing Once Upon a Time in Venezuela when it premiered at Sundance, and then I watched it again just recently, and was just, you know, very taken again with how incredibly beautiful and complex this film is, and really sort of epic in terms of the lives that you show and the time that you cover, and all the things that we learn and are exposed to here. So I really just wanted to start by asking you to tell us a little bit about how you started this journey to making this film, which I know was shot over several years.
Yes. Well, first, thank you again for being here, guys. And it is very exciting to start this series of talks overall with you, Lisa, because you have been right from the start. And everything began in year 2012, that is 8 years ago, when we first shot a short film called The Barrer. And this short film was centered in the lives of this bunch of brothers and sisters, fisher kids from Congo Mirador, this village. And in that first moment, we first came in the very, very first impulse, some years before, it was to do more with the wish of capturing this silent lightning that is called in Spanish el relámpago del Catatumbo. Yeah, so then it was sort of magic that brought us there. And by being there and trying to do that, this crazy thing of trying to capture this thing that connects you with some beyond world, we began to meet the people there, and that's how we got to meet the kids and so on. And we realized that this village, apart from being kind of picturesque and brought from the world of a Garcia Marquez story, it was as well the reflection of what was going on with us as Venezuelan citizens. In that moment, our families were being divided into, because of our political passions. So then we were polarized and more polarized, and living under a world that was becoming more authoritarian, where the populism took some levels in which families were being really oppressed, and up to now. So in the Congo Mirador, it was going on more or less the same. And within that scenario, that was, these people living in their own way, in their own culture, on the waters, the streets of water, and people going with boats, and having this kind of a water life, amphibious life, and a bit Neolithic life. We were seeing that as well. There was this phenomenon in which there was this political leader that was having most of the power and the resources and using them to have control over the community. So then this we were seeing from this was like the big picture of this, but we came into that really like from one thing to the other, a little bit like the film is made. So at the very first moment, as we were talking now, in the very first approach to Catapult, the idea was to make a coming of age story from the point of view of the kids. And then the storytelling waving of the whole thing began, because the kids actually did move from this bunch of kids that we were working with, these brothers and sisters. They did move from the village because of the same situation. And then we had rapidly reacted to that and thought, okay, what is the story about? And it begins from very early stages. One is always confronted with the question of what is the first impulse and why am I here? And then we decided to stay in the village, because it was not about this family, but about the story of the village, and the village being the reflection of something bigger. We don't know how big it is, but at this point, I think this is a reflection that is it is not only about Venezuela, it is about us as humanity. It has a lot to do with the moment in which we are, this moment in which, in our political behavior, we tend to get heavily radicalized, and then at the same time, populism takes place, and then we don't get to agree on the common problems. So that's how it kind of began. Like always, this view on the bigger picture, our families, our country, etc., and then how to tell it from this village, and being even more specific, how to tell it through the story of this person, and what role has this story within the bigger story of the village, what role has the story of the teacher within the bigger picture, or the story of Tamara as a political leader, but as a woman as well, of this girl that is becoming a woman, So, and it began like that, like a waving process.
Well, I want to ask in a bit, just more into those different stories and how they all weave together, but before that, paint a little picture of what was it like shooting in the town, or even getting to the town. It was quite, I understand it was even just getting there, and there was a lot of preparation, and I know you spent quite a bit of time there. So what was that even like over those years, getting to the town, shooting in the town?
Yes, well, the actual going to the town is from the closest city is like a 3 hours journey in a boat within the lake. But to get to these other cities, in total, it's really like 2 days to get there from Caracas, for instance, which is the main city, and just that is an adventure. This is a place that is actually quite complex because it's taken by several paramilitary groups, armed groups. And for instance, to get into the village, you have to get into the lake, and in the lake there is lots of piracy to steal the several things, mainly the engines. The engines in this lake are the gold. This is like the lungs, like our lungs is those engines, because people depend on them for going fishing, and they are the scarcity. It is actually nowadays it might be even worse, because the scarcity in Venezuela, it is enormous. So that means that the value of these engines, as there is not much circulation of resources, the value of these engines is enormous. So you can get killed, or what happens is that they take you from the boats. They come, kidnap you, put you on top of an oil platform. There, you're standing there, and then they leave you and take your boat and an engine. So,
Well,
so then that means that there is a whole strategy to get there.
yeah.
And on the other hand, when it's to bring everything, the water, the drinkable water. At the beginning, we were bringing as well some kind of proteins and so on, but at some point we ended up eating what they like, fish, or what they chase. At some point we ate it's not very correct, but we ate as well crocodiles, because sometimes
crocodiles, yeah.
and capybaras and so on, because these people they chase and fish for eating. And this is like of the context in which we are there. But still, even being hardcore, I mean, at some point one is able to go through all these elements. And there was a point in which the village was as well taken by the paramilitaries, by one of these groups. And at the beginning, of course, that is what primes the relationship. What is the first thing in the relationship is the fear. But very soon, this comes into okay, let's live together. We know that there is an edge here. We know that there is a danger. Still, yes. There is a way in which we are, in which this flows somehow. I don't know, Marianela, how you remember how it was to get there. But somehow we were happy.
Absolutely, because Congo was a mix. It was a very touching place. It was a very special place because it had the beauty of the nature, and also these incredible people that were so open to share with us. But also, it was all this contrast of how dangerous it was to get there, and how difficult and how poor the community was, and it was a place that shocked you when you went there. You just, could see as well, not only the contrast, I remember first night, Annabelle and I, when we went first for the short film, we cried. You were crying because you were thinking, wow, where am I? That I have all these emotions and all these incredible images that mirror our country in such a many ways, in what we were living emotionally and also politically and socially.
Mhm.
So, it was an amazing place because of that. Yeah. But obviously, we immediately got friends with the kids, especially Joanne. We know her since the very first day that we arrived there, and we, the contact and the communication was immediate. At the same with Camarillo, that is the old man, the singer. And something that is kind of surprised us very much was how many this old generation as well, they were poets and singers, as you see this beautiful song, and they give us concerts at night. And it was a town that had a culture, it had a history. The people that were living there, they were fishermen, but it was full of beauty everywhere.
Yeah, actually, they have this culture of that is quite common to be a poet as well, and a fisherman. So, and it comes from that generation overall, the generation of the man with the cuatro. We call it cuatro, and of course, this is part of the magic, and all this world of legends, of spirits and so on. This is there, very, very, very present, and at the same time, now that you talk about Joanne and storytelling, when we talk about this, both things that each story that you find is like, so then what is the story about? You're always confronted, okay, go back. But the story of Joanne, I mean, she being 9 years old, she would tell us how, her story on why she was living with her grandmother, and it was that as a 2-year-old, this girl was heavily beaten, and even her mother, who was had alcohol problems and all kind of, she beat her so hard that she ended up in the water, and the grandmother took her, and since then she stayed with the grandmother, and her mother would be more and more absent intermittently there. And that was just the peak of the iceberg of a story. And in the case of that girl, that was the most vulnerable. In our impulse, we wanted to work with the most vulnerable people. That's why this idea of making a coming of age story.
Yeah.
Which changed then over the time.
Change, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. But also, you remember Joanne's brother, who would tell us, oh, this is when they hit me here and here. It was a whole story he told us with his body about the time that he, these little stories you were encountering, and it was how to balance as well the big picture, the big story we're telling with the individual stories that were, some of them so touching, that you were like, oh my gosh, what. But when we were there, Annabelle and I, we would talk at night as well, and also about all the fictional work, of Venezuelan writers that we will quote, because you were like, oh my gosh, this is Doña Bárbara, who is a...
Yes. all our archetypes, they were very present, and there is this character in the it became Latin American archetype as well, which is the woman that is for one reason or other, she almost wants revenge on men, and she's like this cow woman, and she doesn't need no man, and is the boss, and becomes like this, Saturn that consumes it all, and is the center of power. So then she was there,
The character, yeah.
Yeah.
And also Seth was editing, so Annabelle returned, and he was taking all that part of the storytelling process, which is very valuable.
Well, that's what I wanted to ask. Seth, could you tell us about the editing process over all this time as things were evolving? Tell us a little bit about that process for you.
Well, because I'm the producer, but I'm also the editor. So from the editing point of view, it was great to have this time because every time Annabelle would go, I mean, we would go like I would say at least 3 times a year, more or less, no? And every time you come back with new treasures. So the story would actually develop and get more and more rich through the editing, because we were editing for years, basically. And also that's how the story evolved into something bigger. First, it was this little story about the kids, and then it became the story much more about, like, we could see the symbolism or the parallels to Venezuela. No? And then in the end, like now, this year when we finished, this whole other dimension came to it, that this is a story not only about Venezuela, it's a story about our society in the world right now. Because it's basically the story of a town that consists of 2 groups who are not able to communicate with each other anymore. And in this case, it's Chavistas and not Chavistas. And in America, it's maybe the Trumpists and the not Trumpists, or wherever. Every country has their own little groups that are so radicalized and in their own bubbles that they lost the ability to talk to each other. So this is how the story evolved over the years, from a tiny little story about some kids on a lake to actually something that talks about a much bigger picture.
Absolutely.
And so to have this time to develop this story in such a way and let it grow in such a way is, of course, for an editor, it's a luxury to have this time. It was great. And I mean, there were lots of fights between us, like always, of course, to get the story to this point, and it was only possible through these fights, really, because Annabelle, when we started it, I mean, her whole motivation, she was very angry. It's like the root of it is anger with a government and with a society that really is very destructive. And then in the end, my input came in as an editor. That I said, okay, we cannot have anger as the heart of the film. I always say that the heart of the film has to be the love, and the love for all the people, so to say. No? And I think you can see it in a way in a film that even Tamara, who is like, so to say, the bad character, in the end you feel for her because she loses as well. And this is actually what is happening in Venezuela and what is happening in many countries, that
everyone is a loser.
Everybody is losing, except from these top 1,000 or whatever who have their bank accounts in Switzerland, and they don't lose. But there are many people, millions of people who had dreams and beliefs, and we are not. We are more or less, I don't know, left wing or liberal or whatever you would call it. I mean, we are artists, no? So yeah, and they all lose.
But if you see Tamara, there was the character who is so political, enthusiastic of Chavez and all that. But obviously she was still, like Seb just said, it was her town, the town that she loved, that her father was one of the founders, and you feel as well her grief, And so obviously, all these characters that are there as well represent part of our society and what's going on in Venezuela. But as very well said put as well, it shows a bigger picture, because the autocracies that are happening in the world, are not Maduro is not an isolated phenomenon.
It's very much in our times, this proliferation of how the dynamics of power bring to this point. It comes to this point that these figures emerge as this totalitarian presence that really break us and crush people, like the lifetime of people, which is what has happened too.
But also you still have Camarillo there singing with the beauty of that man. Every time we saw him, you felt his soul, like, all these things that he kept alive. We always said is that the representation of the old Venezuelan, like our grandparents, the ones that are so close to the land and still have so much to offer.
Yeah,
I love that Tamara, even though I know she in some way, she's a full character. That there are times like we see her. She's not just the sort of the bad guy, or she's not just the and I love, because that makes it the people are complex, and I love that
Yes.
in the end how you really painted a very full picture. And
Yes, yes, that took time. That took
Yeah.
time and lots of like blood, tears and blood, and it's not.
Yeah, and as you're saying, you know, so often films that take time, you know, they're initially they're very important. They have a lot to say, and then with time, sadly, often they become even more relevant and more important. And I think this film, as you say, it's pointing out these political divisions where people can't even, you know, listen to each other, and the you know, really just, you know, disturbing aspects of populism and threats to our democracy that, of course, resonates in the United States, resonates around the world. So this film really became this focusing on this small town became a kind of a really big universal story.
No, it has been growing for such a long time, and it still is growing. I mean, when you saw the images of what happened in the capital last week, and then you see archive footage from the coup in Venezuela and so on, it's like there's parallels, and it still is growing, really. Like it still gathers meaning with time.
And I wanted to say as well that I think the film has reached an audience in Venezuela in a very profound way, because all the messages that we have received, they're just, you know, people have connected with the story because it's what we have been living through. And we hope it will connect as well with the audiences of the world because of the same reason.
Mm-hmm.
So
and I guess that.
I was just going to ask about the film has been shown in Venezuela, and I was going to ask a little bit about the response. Talk a little bit, but
up to now it's been shown in platforms because of several reasons, COVID, etc. The cinemas in the country are still not open, so it is in several online platforms. However, this is very elitist, I would say, because just a little percentage of the population is able to see the film this way. Abroad, well, we are more than 5 million abroad, the Venezuelan diaspora.
Mm-hmm.
So then, in that environment, we have shown to a certain extent as well online, and in the States, of course, is open for in the streaming. And the response it is been really, really touching for us to see how people get moved, and it's beautiful to see how people are both touched in their fiber of, you know, the longing and the sense of root and all these feelings that are both painful and other things. But as well, it brings some kind of connection with a sense of belonging. And which connects you with some kind of dignity, of sense of, okay, we are this, and it's happening this to us, and this has been really beautiful because we are nothing less than a devastated country. So it is beginning for us another journey in that sense, and it's a bit of a healing journey. I want to say it this way because the film somehow has the capacity of bringing these kind of discussions as we're having right now, and this sort of questions of, okay, what happened, and right now what can we do now, and this is really, really great to live as a human being, you know, to have because it's something that is not happening only it's happening to us in our families. It's healing for my own mother and father, and you know, and that's great. And very soon we are to show it in the open spaces, and we're super much looking forward to it.
We actually have this plan of like we're gonna have inflatable screens, and we're gonna have free screenings in public squares in Venezuela, in let's say in the bigger cities, hopefully also in smaller towns. and we're gonna have free open air screenings, even if the cinemas are closed.
That's
And
fantastic.
we're really looking forward to that. It's gonna be great.
There is one question from the audience, and so I'm going to ask about funding, for how you put together funding for the project, and maybe we can, if we have any time left, talk about that, and also what it's like to be a documentary filmmaker in Venezuela today, including.
But funding, you first have to go to the Catapult Film Fund. That's how big journeys start.
It's true, but
It is so true, yeah. And then we had, obviously, we had funding from the SENAC, the Venezuelan Film Fund, when it was still independent, which is not anymore the case. And but through the devaluation of the money, like this fund basically shrunk to, in front of our eyes, it was like disappearing basically from one day to the other. And then it was mostly international funding from the ITFA Bertha Fund and Ibermedia and the Tribeca Film Institute, which unfortunately also doesn't exist anymore, but hopefully they come back. We need you. And that was most of the funding.
Yeah, but from that perspective, Venezuelan filmmakers are really parias, as well as any other artist. We really have the state as such, as a society, it is all over the place, and the state are being this civil society that is coming into like grass to do things, like foundations for humanitarian helps, or in this case, these entrepreneurial impulses, but that have to hang into the cooperation in the world. So then we as artists, we really depend on the connections that we have with artists of other countries. In this case, this cooperation with SEB is been essential. So and this is how we begin to exist, and to keep a story like this that is very authentic to its own way of telling story and to its own. I think it is quite difficult, because once you bring a broadcaster or something, possibly these aspects they change. So then to have a truly free storytelling,
it's becoming more and more difficult as well.
It's taking its challenges, because differently from other countries, I don't know, other Latin American countries, there is not any base from your own state that kind of protects this interest of telling a free story, or a story that has to do as well with their own culture. This is as well another aspect. So then we depend on this cooperation and on these connections with the world, with the whole world.
Yeah. Thank you. Another question from our audience is, how did Tamara give you the access that she did? So much privacy, you were there with her, so many moments and all the information. And how did you get inside the governor's office? How did all that access work out?
Well, it took years to get into Tamara. It took years. We first began to work or to shoot, let's say, with Natalie and her family. Natalie is the teacher of the village, and the kids, Joaini and her brother, and Camarillo, who is the musician. So this happened one after the other, and that was the area in which we were moving for 2-3 years, and just in the third year, it is when we were allowed in Tamara's house. And the way in which we were allowed is that our house was moved. The house where we used to live was moved, as you see in the film, how they move when they leave the village. And we did propose Tamara a business. She has some rooms for rent. That is eventually some oil workers, for instance, or some people that they rented would stay there for one night or something, and she rented some rooms there. And we proposed to her, what if we stay here? We are going to be working here for a year or more, we don't know. And that's how we got in, through business. But business became very quick a relationship that goes through the friendship. I got to say, I mean,
Absolutely.
isn't it? I mean, we began, of course, with all our points of view, looking through our points of view, and I guess that when we calmed down, we became actually friends, isn't it, Marianela? I mean, we were like,
Absolutely.
I love Tamara, you know, she
opened her heart as well, and what she did is because that's what she believed, and all the things she does in the film, that's a practice that all the other chavistas do. So it's what it is.
And it's a person as well that had because of this strength that she has as a business person and as a really independent spirit, that she just wants it her way, and that she is the one that moves things within the community. She's the one that really can move things into that community, and this kind of character has lots of energy. Then to get in the governor, this was another, this is a cheeky, the cheeky side of a filmmaker. What it happened is that there was an opportunity. I mean, there was a wish from the community. There was the link, because there is a person that works as a representative from the party, really, that works there along with Tamara. And through the dynamic of the demand on their need of these machines, and what they were doing to obtain it, through that dynamic, there was the possibility of going to the governor's office. He found this space, and the governor has as well, like this. At that point, there was this program that was like the government office with the people, something like that, no? And then he would receive in his residency, in the governor's residency, the representative of different communities, and then he would film them or have a photographer, and this would be the communication of the office. This was kind of like an image propaganda or public image aspect, and they could get into that gap, and we went there, like
and this was in one of the last years of the shooting, and this was actually the moment when she came back with this footage that we really knew we have a film, because this is the peak scene of the film, because this is the moment when Tamara breaks, when you see in front of the camera her whole dream falling to pieces, because she's getting the same medicine that she's feeding people, she's getting it from him.
Absolutely.
And this is when you understand what's actually happening in the country, and
it's such the look on her face,
yes. And also I think that's also one of the message of the movie, of what has happened to our society. We have been divided for so long, and like the compassion that we have to have for each other in order to rebuild this country one day, which is like
and then this is when you can make as well this transpolation to us as humankind. So how are we doing to deal with our main problems? Just to bring the first and the most important, in my point of view, the one that has to do with the change of the climate. What are we going to do with that? And we get lost into our points of view and positions and ideologies, and blinded kind of from them.
Absolutely. Is it completely abandoned there now? what is it like in the
Well, this is a spoiler for the ones that have not seen the film. But no, but they now actually there are 4 or 5 people there. They are 2. Yeah.
Camarillo among them, no?
Oh yeah, yeah.
The old man, yeah.
The old
He
man.
said he will stay there. I mean, he will die there basically. So even if he's the only one left, he will not go anywhere. So
Oh my goodness.
he's still there.
Wow.
Well, we have the dream of showing it. I mean, to the people of the Congo, the ones that are still that they are displaced, but within the same state. We want to show it in the main city there, Maracaibo, where the governor office is, and to bring them and to make a get together. But lots of them are in Colombia, so then of course we do it with the ones that are there.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense. Well, I wanted to sort of wrap us up. This has been such a good conversation. I've enjoyed so much talking to you. And just, thank you again for this amazing film. And I hope everybody can see it. It's really extraordinary. Is there any final thoughts from anybody you'd like to share?
We want to thank you as well
Thank
for
you.
hosting us and for supporting us for
Yes.
so many years, and it was a pleasure.
Yeah.
Huge pleasure for us at Catapult as well, and it's so great to see you again.
Yeah. Thank you for the people that are attending this conversation.
Thank you so much.
Fantastic.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
It was a pleasure.